Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Source ZeroCon 2023. My name is Jason Lewkowicz, and I am Optiv's Chief Services Officer. It is with great pleasure I get to kick off Source ZeroCon for 2023, and I couldn't be more excited to be your keynote and opening speaker. So a little bit about myself. I've been with Optiv now for about 18 months. I've enjoyed my time here. I've had a variety of roles, and this past January, I was asked to lead the overall services organization. And one of the things that I like the most about being at Optiv and specifically supporting this conference is the community aspect. I love how many people come together to learn and to invest their time into making this conference so successful. So let me start by saying to my team who have invested so many hours and so much of their personal time to bringing such great content to everybody, thank you sincerely. Without you, this would not be able to be successful. And then, of course, without our sponsors. So let me just take a second and name off our sponsors. And again, my sincere appreciation for investing capital and financial backing to bring this thing to life. So Veracode, ThreatSims, OpenText, No Name Security, Hidden Layer, Helicon, Hack the Box, and Brinka. Thank you very much for your support and bringing such great content to those who are paying attention right now. So what do I want to talk about? You know, it's interesting. When I was asked to keynote this and open it up, I thought to myself, you know, what is it that I could bring to this community that would be interesting and useful? It's been quite some time since I was a practitioner and doing research and development around the threat space and attack and pen. And then it dawned on me, what I could talk about would be my career journey, especially with what's going on with the economic times that we're facing right now with these macroeconomic headwinds. And I've lived through this a number of times. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to break it down into kind of three specific sections. So I'm going to talk about community. You'll hear me interweave community throughout this. I'm going to talk about career lessons and specifically how that ties into what we're seeing today. And I'll dub it as Revenge of the CFO. And then I'll conclude with Lewkowicz predictions. So what do I think is going to be more prevalent as we go through the remainder of this year and then through next year? What do I think the trends and themes are going to be, and what I like to see so many of you investing your time, energy, and efforts. So with that, let me talk a bit about myself and that career journey of mine. So what most of you may not know, especially those who know me, is that I actually started my career in the mailroom in Andersen Consulting in 1997 as a young 19-year-old college dropout. So why did I drop out of college? The truth is, I grew up in a working class family, and my parents didn't go to college. My dad did graduate with an associate's degree, but didn't go away to university. He stayed local, went to a 2-year program. My grandparents were immigrants post World War II, and again, blue collar, didn't go to school, didn't get any kind of formal education. So when it came time for me to go away to school, it was not really a thing. Now, some other context that I think might be helpful. At a young age, I learned that if I wanted to have nice things, I had to have a job to pay for them. So it became very easy for me to connect my motivation and what incentivized me to go to work, material things, or at least possessions that I could go out and buy, cars, watches, whatever the case may be. So my work ethic was kind of instilled at a very young age. I think I had my first full-time job. Actually, I don't think. I had my first full-time job in the summer going into my 8th grade year of junior high. All right, so fast forward. So 19 years old, I've dropped out of school, and I've reached out to a friend's mom, and I asked her if she has the ability to get me some interviews, as she works at a staffing company. And at the time, I was working full-time between the mall and W.W. Granger, where I was doing cash check processing. And while I had more than 40 hours of work per week, I was making just a bit more than minimum wage, which, unfortunately wasn't going to land me an apartment or really propel me into getting nicer things, which at the time was my big motivation, at least how I defined success. So she was able to get me a number of interviews, and I did land a job at Andersen Consulting. Now, what's funny is at the time of landing said job, I came home and I told my dad, good news, this job that I just got, we should be able to replace the windows on the first floor of the house. And what's funny about that is I actually thought it was Andersen, the window company, not Andersen Consulting, that would eventually turn into Accenture, the large consulting and professional services conglomerate that we see today. So I'm not going to give you the full story of my duties in the mailroom, but what made me successful in getting out of the mailroom was a few things. The first one is, at the time, the facility that I worked in operated much like a community. It was all entirely owned by Andersen, so everybody who was in the facility was Andersen Consulting, and therefore the ability to make friends and connections and develop a broad network and mentorship was very easy. So the first thing is I became very interested in operational efficiency. When I was around pushing my mail cart, one of my mail stops was a manager who was leading the UPS project at the time, and he had made a joke to me that I should read this paper that they had just written that talks about how UPS delivers packages. So I did. I went home and I read it, and what I had found was that from an efficiency perspective, UPS does everything around right turns. And keep in mind, this is pre-GPS. So I asked the building facilities manager if he would give me an AutoCAD or a building layout of the floors that I was delivering mail to. And sure enough, I rerouted myself where I was making all right turns. And I did remove about an hour's worth of time throughout my day going out and delivering mail. And because of that operational efficiency that I had introduced, I was actually asked to go and do and support other areas. So I moved from the mailroom and eventually started supporting the just-in-time seating that the facility had. If you're not familiar with that, 300 seats, 1,000 consultants, and my responsibility was to manage those desks and to make sure that people had the materials which were theirs delivered to them. Mondays typically were the busiest days, as were Fridays, as I was moving stuff away. But everything at the time that I was doing was within Excel, and the materials that these individuals had, which were stored in these storage cubes or these storage containers, were kind of spread out around the building's lower level and just different closets. So the biggest part of my time was actually going and finding where said material was and bringing it out. So I asked my boss at the time if he would be willing to let me buy or get a book on Microsoft Access, and then, of course, the program, so I could build an Access database, allowing me to be more efficient in terms of what it was that I was doing and delivering these bins. So putting it into perspective, my job was taking anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day. Mondays and on the weekends would be a bit longer as I was bringing stuff back and forth. But creating this Access database actually reduced my time from 6 to 8 hours down to about 30 minutes. I was able to book space out quite significantly in about 30 days, except the real advantage was I knew where everybody's stuff was on the lower level in those storage in those storage closets. Fast forward a few months, I was talking to the managing partner of the building that we worked in, and he was kind of talking about, what I had done. And I asked him if he would be open to me going out and actually finding a software to use instead of my hodgepodge database that would, get runtime errors and crash out quite frequently. And he said, yeah, sure. You go and find something, and if it's not too expensive, we'll make the investment. So myself, and again, thinking about that community component, I had gone and talked to our CIO team, who I was close with, and I asked them if they would be willing to go and help me find a product and POC it. And sure enough, we did. We found a company called EMS, which was run by a guy named Dean Evans. And they came out, we did the POC, we made the investment. Now, what's interesting about that is if you've been to an Accenture facility anytime or you're from Accenture, the technology that we made the investment in 1998 is still used to this day. Of course, it's been updated significantly since then, but all conference rooms, offices, and any type of space that you need to reserve, as well as connecting to printers and other type of technology, all gets run through this thing. So now you're probably wondering yourself, so you went from mailroom into this just-in-time thing. How did you get into technology and then security? So as I was managing these spaces, and I had all this extra time, and I would oftentimes, as I was walking the floor, talking to the people that were in the space that I was supporting, they would often complain about the ability to get tech support and kind of quickly. So I started actually offering technology support to the people who were using my space. And as you can imagine, as time would have it, or as I've been doing this for some time, the facilities technology services had gotten a bit frustrated that I was providing service to people that should be going to them. So Phil, who was the manager, had reached out to me and said, "Hey, Jason, I know what you're doing, and I know that people are quite appreciative of the service that you're giving. Well, we'd really like if you'd cut it out because that should be going to us, not to you." And I said, "Well, that's great, Phil. I would love to stop providing technology support to these people. Here's the deal. You give me a job on your team, and I'll be providing tech support where it's supposed to be done from. Otherwise, I'm going to keep doing it." And Phil said, "Unfortunately, I don't have any roles for you." And then I said, "Unfortunately, I'm going to keep doing it." 3 weeks later, Phil had reached out to me saying that they were going to be opening a new role. He thought I'd be perfect for it. And I did apply. And my first job in technology was, and at the time I wouldn't have been called this, but setting up a whole asset management process and program for the facility that I worked in, this technology park. So I had the responsibility of creating the first CMDB, and again, kind of aligned to that operational efficiency. What I had found in this role was not only was I going out and documenting who had what asset and what material was on it, there was the ability to, and this wasn't part of the job, but one of the things I started doing was notating down the software which was going onto the assets and then following up with people if they actually needed it or were using it. And if you think about what's going on right now with tech rationalization being a hot topic, we were able to save quite a bit of money because I was reducing the software footprint that were on people's assets because they didn't need it. Therefore, we weren't having to pay the software fees and licensing fees for said software. So that was one thing that I had done kind of out of the gate. The other big contribution that I had made was the way that we were going about setting up assets. So I'm a new joiner to the company. Human resources would submit a request for me to get a new asset, except that request wouldn't come through until just about my first day. And therefore, when I was made aware to go and set up an asset for the new person coming in, it may take a couple of days. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you think about all these books that sit behind me and just assume that each one of them is an asset, they weren't ready to go. I wouldn't go and configure them, or at least the process we had was not to go and configure them until that first ticket came in. So I came in on a weekend and I imaged out all these assets that were sitting behind me so that when the new joiner would come in, and again, tangenting for a second, I was very focused on customer service and client value. And to me, my customers, my clients were these employees in the building who were leveraging the technology that I was supporting. So I wanted it to be a great experience for them. I mean, imagine it's your first day on the job. You want to get an asset when you first start. You don't want to have to wait 5 or 6 days to get it. So that was one of the first contributions that I had made. I would say that's outside of. So you've got the cost savings piece, which ties to the asset inventory, or at least what's on the assets. And then there's this process that I've introduced around how do I get new joiners and new people assets on their first day. So fast forward a bit beyond that, and I've gone through, I've cleaned everything up. It wasn't uncommon to have different types of software vendors in our facility talking about the new great things that they did. And I remember sitting in on a presentation with Symantec at the time. I think it was Symantec. And they had talked about this new product that they were coming out with called Ghost. And they walked me through what Ghost was. And of course, I went to Phil, my manager, and said, "Hey, Phil, I want to make this investment. And I want to use this Ghost product because I can do 8 assets at the same time, giving them an image. And that should really speed things up." I got the approval. He said he didn't care, go off and do whatever. I found a server that was sitting unused at the time, loaded it with Ghost. And sure enough, what was taking 4 to 6 hours to get these machines built, I was now able to push an image out in anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the hard drive side. So a huge operational efficiency introduced where I'm able to reduce the amount of time spent that I'm doing things, which of course gets me interested in what else can I be doing. So I'd reached out to Phil, the boss, and I said, "Phil, I really want to get a job focused on field support." So everybody understands in the tech support group that I was in, there were 3 specific functions. There was the asset management team, there was the help desk, and then there was field support. Field support worked on the most complicated things. They were out fixing and troubleshooting from network to desktop to server. So Phil said, "That's great. I really like that you want to do this. However, there's a process that we have. And the process is you have to go from this job to the help desk and from the help desk to field support." And I said, "Well, that's great, but I don't want to do that. I want to go right from one to the other." And he said, "Look, I'll make you a deal. You work 1 month on my help desk. and you outperform everybody who's there, both in client satisfaction, so that the surveys that would go out, and volume, and I'll give you the opportunity to go and apply for the job that's open. And I said, sure. And I did. Those 4 weeks, I worked my tail off and was outperforming and producing everybody else that was on my help desk and was offered the role in field support. So this is late 90s at this time, and Anderson Consulting gets hit with the Melissa virus, and I was part of the team to go and figure out what happened and how it happened, et cetera. So this was my first entry into security. It's the first time that I had seen technology be used for anything but good and information sharing. And my eyes were just wide open, and like the boom inside of my head, holy cow, this is really freaking cool. I had no idea that things could be used this way. And that's when Anderson Consulting and eventually Accenture's CERT was born. And I was kind of at the ground floor when that occurred. I helped them stand up their first set of technology, build out their lab, which is nothing more than a broom closet on the first floor in our technology building in Northbrook, Illinois, and was eventually asked to be a part of that team. Now, what's interesting is I really liked what I was doing. I loved my team. I liked Phil and all the way up to JVK, who was the leader there. But I really wanted to, be a leader, and I also wanted to be in an area that was growing. So I had talked to Phil, and I said, "Look, if I can't make manager," and kind of where I was a senior consultant, which is as high as you can go before you're a leader. He said, I can't do anything. And I said, look, if you can't do anything, then it's time for me to make a move to a different group. Now, I'm going to pause here, and I think this is where the story becomes really relevant to many of you. As you grow in your career, you start getting certifications, you're making a bigger network, there's more demand for you. It's a really easy time to jump from an organization. And I could have jumped from where I was and gone and been a tech support manager or an IT manager somewhere else, whether it be supporting clients, as I was doing, as well as supporting the internal service of Anderson Consulting and then eventually Accenture at the time. I'm glad that I didn't. I'm glad that I gave the company the opportunity to give me something more to do. And I find more often than not, especially when I'm in a mentor-mentee relationship, that people do that. They just want to jump. Maybe it's for 20, 30% increase in pay. And the thing to think about that increase in pay is, while there may be an increase in your base or your overall total compensation package, you have to factor in all the other things that you may not think about. So if you work 40 hours a week now and you make 100K, and I'm just using it for simplistic purposes, but you're going to get a 30% increase, so to 130K, but you're going to work 60 to 80 hours a week. Are you really getting an increase in money? Because if you factor in what your actual hourly value is, it's gone down. So really think about, what does the additional money actually get you? Is it linear in terms of increase, or is it kind of not? The other thing is, there's a lot of other pieces that need to be brought into view. Do you get training? What does vacation time look like? How are benefits? Do you have a hybrid, flexible, or remote workforce? Work option. So there's a lot of other things to think about just beyond pay. So I throw that out there as there were numerous decision points along my career where I had the opportunity to jump, and I chose not to. The other piece, which I think is really important here, is it was around this time that I started getting very interested in the other pieces of the business that I wouldn't have necessarily known about. And so I was really interested in how business was progressing, what was going on. And so when the security opportunity positioned itself, and I had the opportunity to move in 2003, I saw security as being a strategic bet for myself. So much so that when I took the role in security, I actually took a demotion and pay cut to move. So I think there's times when opportunities may present themselves that you have to think about the overall large picture, not necessarily the specific moment in time. So I did move into security, and the first many weeks were spent doing FTK training, guidance software training, and going to interrogation and interview training with the Reed School and what the FBI and the CIA put together for non-government. So My first role in security was that of a forensic investigator tied closely to our corporate investigations team. I also did support a number of our clients in our products portfolio. So how did I grow my career in security? So the first thing I did, again, was really introducing operational efficiencies. So within the Ncase tool, if you're familiar with it, the ability to create specific scripts to run and do things, which was, I think, the original SOAR. What things could I batch out to kind of go and collect other things? So doing forensic investigations, the first big introduction that I would say that I did was with e-discovery. So it wasn't uncommon to get electronic discovery requests, in the 2004 to 2008 timeframe. But most of the time when those would come in, you would partner with a law firm and a Protiviti or a Navigant or a Huron Consulting or EY. There's a lot out there. I had been called in for a discovery request that came in, and I was going through the material because they were trying to figure out which firm to use. And when I was looking at the request, I said, but Rich was the gentleman's name. I said, Rich, I can do this. Like, this is something we can absolutely do within the team. I have the technology, and I could probably get it done in under a week. He said, well, we'll try this one with you, and if it works, great. So we did. And of course, we knocked it out of the park. And beyond that point, my team was doing all of the e-discovery related work. Of course, there were times, depending on the case, that we would bring in a third party to just validate what we had done was aligned to all best, industry best practices, et cetera. But the cost saving introduced from that first request worked out to anywhere from $15 to $35 million a year in savings by us doing the processing internally and turning the materials over to the outside firms that would then go and go through the actual discovery and bring things to the opposing attorneys. So that was the big first introduction. The second was standing up our own SOC. So we had everything run through a third party. They asked me to take over perimeter defense. As I looked at what was going on, I said, we can absolutely do this better, faster, cheaper in-house. So went ahead and pulled that stuff in. That was when we started also providing said services to clients. And keep in mind, all this was flowing up underneath me. I reported to an information security director, which was the highest level security person we had at the time. It wasn't until 2012 that we went and actually stood up a formal information security program with a CISO. I was part of that foundational team. Again, I was also doing our federal work and supporting Fed clients, but I was very much interested in growing out what our information security and CISO program would look like. So 2013 introduced our intelligence program, designed a whole intelligence program, bottoms up, top down, in terms of how are we going to consume intelligence, where were we going to get it from, was it going to be OSINT as well as paid for services, what kind of scoring we would do to make sure that there was efficacy in what we were bringing in. Built a whole program around that. Shortly after that, started getting involved in M&A related work, and so on and so forth, and built out my career. Made managing director and was deputy CISO. Loved what I was doing, except I wanted more from my career. I was really chasing the title of CISO. I badly wanted to be Accenture CISO. And there were a number of things that had come up that should have come my way to get me to be the CISO. And a lot of them had to do with moving things around. So one of the things that I misstepped on, and I think hurt me in my career, was not creating a succession plan. So when you're an exceptional employee and you just knock it out of the park time and time again, it's difficult for your leaders to let you move on to take on other things. They're happy to keep you where you are and give you more things, but really for you to take a big step forward and go do other things, you got to have a succession plan. You got to have a number 2 or a number 3 who can take on your responsibilities so that when you go and talk to your leader about what you want to go do next, you can say, John and Jill are both ready for the task. Let them take this on. I have trained them. Give them an opportunity to show you that they are ready for this next step. And I think it's huge. So if you're a leader listening to this, what is your succession plan? Who are the people that you see outperforming, and are you having conversations with them about what their career steps may look like? Okay, so it's the summer before the pandemic, so we are in the 2019 timeframe, and Cognizant is chasing me to be their CISO. I had a great relationship with the chief security officer there, dating back to 2016, and he had reached out. He was very interested in me coming and joining him as the CISO and to be ideally his successor. But I wasn't ready to make the jump. Again, I had these things lined up at Accenture that should have propelled me to be the CISO, and it was in the January of 2020 timeframe when those things didn't play themselves out. My boss wasn't going to be able to move on, and therefore it created this stuck position where I was kind of stuck where I was. And that's when I reached back out to this individual and I said, I do think it's time to sincerely look at this. It gets me to CISO. It's an easy step for me to go from the deputy CISO at Accenture, which is a large professional services firm, into Cognizant. And the offer came through. I did all of those waiting things. So for me, what was really important, the ability to travel, training, compensation, benefits package, and the ability to work remotely. So with a family and a heavy travel schedule, the ability when I'm not traveling to be able to work from home or only go into the office when is convenient for me, or of course, if there's a client related thing, was hugely important. And when I measured all these things out, Cognizant actually won. So I put forth my resignation to Accenture. After 23 and almost a half years, I moved on, which was a very difficult thing to do. I'm emotionally tied. It's part of my personal brand. So if you've been with your company for a long time and you're going to be making the jump from one to another, and long time I would say is more than 10 years, be prepared for the emotional component that comes with it. You may not recognize or realize just how tied into the organization you are, and therefore you should expect a period of mourning as you go from one to the other. I know I did. It was very emotionally challenging. Now, here's where things also get really interesting. So I'm leading up to my time to go from Accenture to Cognizant. It is April of 2020. The world has locked down. Everybody is at home because the pandemic is in full swing. I'm tasked with going into Cognizant with a few specific things. One is to build up their information security program. The other is to work on moving them from an almost entirely in the office dedicated workforce to being remote. And how do we provide, calming and a vote of confidence to their clients that the assets that they have are secure and that there's not going to be any type of data impacts. And I'm going and setting up all my open source feeds, following the researchers that I do, much like this community. And I went downstairs to play Fortnite with my son. And when I came upstairs, and keep in mind, this was on a Friday, there were a number of tweets that had popped up in my tweet deck. And I went and looked at them and I knew immediately what it was. It was the Maze Actor. And I reached out to my new boss and I said, hey, is there anything you want to tell me? Anything going on that might be important for me to know? And they said, no, everything's going to be fine. You're going to love it. Can't wait for you to get here on Monday. And I sent across the information that I had, and the response I got back was, "Oh crap, it's out. People know. It's public knowledge now that we've been breached." So I had my time at Cognizant. I was there for about 2 years as their CISO, and I think where I made the largest impact would be defining metrics that would show value to the leadership team about what the information security program was doing. One of the most important pieces in the role that you have, whether you are an individual contributor to a team leader, to a business unit or service line leader, to the overall organization's boss, is you have to be able to show the value that you are providing, whether it be direct revenue, cost savings, operational efficiency, et cetera. So the view that I was trying to provide was, how are we reducing digital risk? And how can we translate that into, when we're going and doing pitches to clients, that this is the most secure organization on the planet to be putting your money with, especially after we've had this breach? Why should you trust us? So it's a good pause point. If you think about your role today and you reflect on the value that you're providing to your organization, how would you define it? Would it be that you're operating at a high cadence and high performance because of your output? Would it be quality? Would it be bookings in terms of what you've sold? Would it be what you've innovated on? Could be anything. But my task to you as you're listening to this is think about what are the three things that you could go back to your boss with that they may not know that you're doing, and round out an overall value proposition of yourself. What is the value that you're driving? And if you come away from that question not really knowing, I think that's the first area you should think about as you are thinking about how you're going to grow your career. The second thing is what has made me successful moving up the ladder, and this is from a level 13 at Accenture all the way up to managing director and into the managing director ranks, not just entry level managing director. I always had a 1, 3, and 5 year plan. I was always focused on what was I going to be doing in the future, not right now. And I think pieces of that, as you think about it, can't just be around professional goals. So for me, whether it was family, completing my education and going back with getting my university degree, learning a new sport or some type of hobby, whatever the case may be, I had a 1, 3, and 5 year plan. And then within each one of those, I had specific milestones that I had to achieve. This way I knew I was growing along the course of my goal. And I think there needs to be some type of reward component for it too. So maybe there's a new toy of sorts that you want to buy, or an investment that you want to make, or a vacation that you want to take, whatever it may be. Have some type of reward when you get to those major gates so that you can reward yourself for all the hard work, energy, and effort that you're expending. Hugely important. Now, I'm going to flip this around. If you're in a team leader role or in some type of people leader, people manager role, these are great questions to be asking those who report up to you, and any mentor-mentee relationships as well. Great points to focus on. Where are you in your career? Where do you want to be? How are you going to get there? And I think that ties into training and certifications, et cetera. That's one of the areas I like to focus on the most, actually, is, what training and what investments are you making in yourself to get to where you want to be? So that's my career story. That's how I've gone along this way. Now, the last piece of it is, so I leave Cognizant, going on to Optiv. I had a number of CISO opportunities put in front of me, 2 law firms, a large product company, and then Optiv. And with Optiv, it was to be the senior vice president leading their cyber defense and applied security business, which was managed services, architecture and engineering, and attack and pen and threat, which is this community here. And it was the most interesting to me. I wanted to be in a position where I could actually work with clients, work with large teams, and push them to be as exceptional as they could be, whether it be through metrics or goals or focused outcomes. I wanted to see this place really grow, and I wanted to have an opportunity to get back to working with clients. And I think what's propelled me since joining as the SVP of our cyber defense to the head of consulting, now over all of our services business, is being focused on client centricity. So whoever your client is, and you should know who your client is, how can you provide them the best service possible? Because at the end of the day, we're all in a customer service role, and the clients seeing value, our peers and partners seeing value in us, hugely, hugely important. So I'm going to wrap things up. I hope that you have found this interesting. I figured it was the one thing that I could actually give back to this community. The other thing I'll say is on the community, and I'm going to go into my projections piece. What I love about this and what got me so into security at the time was the community that I worked in, whether it be from the HTCIA to InfraGuard to reading Alt 2600, going to DEF CONs all the way back to 2004, and spending so much time in the different villages. It was the community of people. Anytime I got stuck, we came together and got each other through it, from a technology perspective. So I love the idea of open source. I love the crowdsourcing way and approach to do things. May not always be the most profitable, but when it comes to solving problems as a community and as a collective, it's extremely important. And I think it makes us better as a community and as a collective than just as the individuals. So with that, thank you. Now, predictions. What am I interested in? What do I think is going to happen through the remainder of this year and into the next year? I think we're going to see a re-rise in ransomware. The most recent one that I was reading about is the stealing of Azure tokens. Really interesting newish technique, but one that I'm seeing be quite successful. And it's always interesting. People ask me all the time, do I find, a lot of these attacks overly sophisticated? And the truth is not really. Once a bad guy's in an organization, yeah, of course, how they remain hidden is always sophisticated. But oftentimes it's the missing of the basics: poor hygiene, misconfiguration, lacking MFA, uh, having an incident response, program and playbook, but never actually running a tabletop and making sure that it's valid. Think about DRBCM. Do you have the appropriate things, and are they working, and have they been validated and tested? That is what I have found, doing incident response 17 years. Most of the time that I went through it, I was not overly impressed. So I think we're going to see a re-rise in ransomware, I think, through the remainder of this year and likely into next year. I think OT is going to be a big area of attack, which and probably specifically against healthcare and maybe mining, but I do see OT being another big area of attack. And the last one's really going to be around artificial intelligence. Um, Artificial intelligence, I believe, is here to stay. You're seeing so much press and media attention around Chat GPT and the different voice and video type recording adjustments, as well as pictures and videos. So I think AI is going to be huge, and this would be an interesting space to see how the security community evolves that. Are we going to do bad with it, or are we going to find ways to incorporate it into what we're doing to make, to improve efficacy and drive more value out of the technology that we have? So some of the stuff that's out there that I'm really interested in watching, you've got Savannah Lazara and Aaron Martin's talk on 621, talking about organizational workloads and moving to the cloud. Cloud is, of course, going to continue to be a huge piece. On AppSec, Dan Sharp, tomorrow on the 22nd, he's going to be covering the rise of low code and no code. AppSec to me is another area that's really interesting. And I always like how things kind of oscillate between infrastructure and application. I think app is going to be another big area of focus. Cyber insurance is huge. I know Dara Gibson is going to be talking about this today, and Bill Young, my great friend, is going to be closing this out on the 23rd. Cyber insurance is really interesting to me. When I went through the breach at Cognizant and came out on the other side and had to go and present to 4 different panels of 15 underwriters each on all the investment we had made and how we are keeping things secure, and not just showing them documentation, but actual proof of what it is that we've done. I think cyber insurance is going to be a big area of focus for the next 18 months. I know it's been for the previous, many years. And then on AI, you got 2 great talks coming up. So Tim Elrod today, AI technology like ChatGPT, voice AI, and how can they be practically applied? I think that's going to be super interesting. And then also today, I think it's actually tomorrow, David Halka's talk on how can we use AI for vulnerability remediation planning, maximizing the benefits of the tools and resources. And again, going back to what do I see so often in how breaches occur? It's having a lack of hygiene and unfortunately introducing technology open to the internet, just misconfigured or not even configured out of default settings. So with that, thank you for listening to me. I hope you have found this valuable and useful. It is a pleasure to speak to you. Enjoy Source ZeroCon 2023. To my team, I am so thankful for the energy and effort that you've put into this. And let's have just an awesome conference. Thank you, everybody. Talk to you soon.